Hello, YouTube. So I've been working on a new series called Exploring Every Inch of Sage, where I just basically test out various builds and setups on Sage. And while doing that series, I noticed some very weird interactions with Tangles, specifically increasing my cast speed or dropping my cast speed would sometimes have no difference in my damage, or sometimes have very big differences in my damages, which made me suspect that Tangles might work in a similar way as Split Shot works. So, for those who don't know, Split Shot essentially works based off the tick rate of the game. The game has a tick rate of 30, where at certain attack speed breakpoints, you will start hitting the enemy more frequently with Split Shot. So it's very important if you play that skill to be aware of what the breakpoints are and to be sure that you're reaching a breakpoint so you don't quote-unquote waste stats. And after doing an extensive amount of just testing and playing around with it, I have found that to be the case for Sage as well. For Tangles as well. So the long and short of it is just this, if you just want the answer. These are your cast speed breakpoints. And when I say cast speed breakpoints, I mean when you go up to the dummy, you hit the dummy. If you go to damage and you see this number, spells cast per second, if it is above any of these numbers, it's at a breakpoint. So if your cast speed is 7.44 cast per second, you are below a breakpoint, and that 1.44 cast per second is completely useless, because the next breakpoint is at 6 casts per second. Now, let me just showcase that quickly. So the way that I tested this, and I've done all of the testing and things, is through deterioration chance. So deterioration is a debuff that lasts for exactly 1 second, which is very helpful for testing the frequency at which you attack. Because generally with a lot of things, you'd expect that for every 1 cast per second, the amount of deteriorations that you apply to the enemy to go up by 1. And what I mean by that is, if your casts per second is 7, then you would expect this number to be 7. If it's 6, you'd expect this to be 6. If it's 9, you would expect this to be 9. But certain skills do not follow that logic, Split Shot being the premier one, which is the first time I found out about the game's tick rate sometimes affecting skills. But Tangles seem to also follow in the same logic. So, if I were to now add a bunch of cast speed to my build, so I have 7.5 casts per second, and my deterioration keeps juggling between 8 and 7. Now, it should be noted, if deterioration juggles between 8 and 7, you're attacking 7 times per second. So I essentially have 7 casts per second. The reason for that is just, it shows the debuff there as the last one is expiring. The very first deterioration you put on as the second ends up is still on the target dummy when you apply the next second's first debuff, if that makes sense. But this is essentially 7 casts per second. If I now go and I actually am not sure how to reduce my cast speed. Increase my cast speed, but I do know how to reduce it. If I go now and I reduce my cast speed, what you're gonna see is this immediately just drops down. I lost 6% cast speed, and now instead of juggling between 7 and 8, it is juggling between 6 and 7. 6, 7, sorry. And our cast per second is 7.44. So even though we only lost 6% cast speed, because we lost a breakpoint, as I've mentioned here, we are now casting 1 less time every single second. We're doing 6 casts per second instead of 7 casts per second. Now, you might be thinking to yourself, oh, but that's just because you went from 7.56 to 7.44. 7.5 rounds up to 8, 7.4 rounds down to 7, and that's the difference. But if I were to now go and drop all of my cast speed. Every single bit of cast speed that I have. Down to having only 6.09 cast speed. And let's just reload the zone, just to make sure there's nothing bugging out. You're gonna see that we're still juggling between 6 and 7. So even though we just dropped around, I don't know, 80% cast speed, the amount of times we're hitting per second is the exact same, as you can track with our deterioration. But if we now go and take it a step further and just drop just a tiny bit more. So now we're at 6.03, still 6.7. We just drop a tiny bit more, down to 5.97. And all of a sudden, we're casting one less time every single second. So I thought I should make a video about this, because I don't think I've ever heard of people talking about Tangles, like, breakpoints before. I've heard a lot of people talking about the fact that Tangles seems to, like, interact weird when you hold on the spam click. This is essentially the reason why it's, quote-unquote, like, seems to act weird. It is just, the skill has certain breakpoints that you need to meet. And if you are, like, just barely below a breakpoint, you'll get a lot of damage by reaching that next breakpoint. And similarly, if you're above a breakpoint, there's no reason to invest into more cast speed unless you intend on reaching the next breakpoint. I'm just trying to think if there's anything else. But yeah, the breakpoints are all based off the tick rate. So, at 5 casts per second, you kind of cast 5 times. Then 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and the skill caps out at 10 casts per second. I'm actually not 100% sure about that, so I'm gonna take that statement back. But from what I've tested so far, it does seem to follow this logic. And as from what I understand about tick rate, is it will eventually cap out at 10, which is also in line with the frame rules of the game. But I'm not 100% sure. But anyway, that's gonna be it from me, YouTube. Expect a lot of Sage content to come in the future, by the way. I've been working quite hard on a few series and stuff. I mentioned before the Exploring Every Inch of Sage. And that series is gonna be like a day 3, day 4 build, testing out various setups and stuff of Sage. And not just Chromatic Shot, but all sorts of skills that people have used throughout the season and things. Because even if Chromatic Shot, you know, gets nerfed and gutted and shot to the ground, I still want to showcase that Sage is quite a lot of viable builds and, you know, just showcase people, like, all the different, like, options and things they have. And show that there's a lot of decisions you can make with Sage. There's a lot of interesting things you can try out and play. So please look forward to that. And I wish you all a lovely day further. Thank you so much for watching. Please leave a like, comment, subscribe, and all that beautiful things. And I'll see you all again another time. Bye-bye, YouTube. Bye-bye. Bye, YouTube.